If someone had told me that the man I trusted with my whole heart was living a second life behind my back, I would have laughed and called it impossible. But sometimes the people we trust the most are the ones hiding the darkest secrets. My name is Sarah. 3 years ago, I believed I had the perfect marriage. My husband Daniel was charming, kind, and successful. Everyone around us admired our relationship. Friends often told me how lucky I was. And honestly, I felt lucky. Daniel always knew the right things to say. Whenever I felt insecure, he reassured me. Whenever life became difficult, he promised we would face everything together. "I'll love you forever," he would say while holding my hand. And every time, I believed him. For the first 2 years of our marriage, everything seemed normal. We traveled together. We celebrated birthdays together. We dreamed about buying a bigger house and starting a family. At least that's what I thought. Then small things started changing. At first, they seemed harmless. Daniel began traveling more often for work. Some trips lasted 3 or 4 days. Sometimes even a week. Whenever I asked questions, he always had an answer. Big client meeting, business conference, emergency project. His explanations sounded reasonable. After all, he had a demanding job. I trusted him completely. That trust would become my biggest mistake. One evening, Daniel returned from another business trip. He looked exhausted. I prepared dinner and tried to make him comfortable. While he was taking a shower, his phone suddenly rang on the kitchen counter. I wasn't trying to snoop. I simply wanted to see who was calling. But when I looked at the screen, something felt strange. The contact name wasn't saved. Just a number, and the message preview underneath made my heart stop. It read, "Miss you already. Can't wait to see you again." I stared at the screen. My stomach twisted, but then I immediately pushed the thought away. Maybe it was a coworker. Maybe I misunderstood. Maybe there was a simple explanation. When Daniel came back, I casually asked him about it. The reaction shocked me. For the first time in our marriage, he became defensive. Very defensive. "It's work-related," he snapped. "Why are you checking my phone?" The question caught me off guard. I wasn't checking his phone. I had only seen the notification. But instead of apologizing, he continued acting angry. That night, I barely slept. Something felt wrong. A feeling deep inside my chest kept telling me that I wasn't seeing the whole picture. Over the following weeks, more strange things happened. Daniel became protective of his phone. He took it everywhere, even to the bathroom. He changed passwords, turned off notifications, and started leaving the room whenever he answered calls. Every red flag was waving right in front of me. Yet I kept making excuses. Because sometimes the truth is too painful to accept. Then came the moment that changed everything. One Saturday morning, Daniel left early for what he called another business meeting. A few hours later, I went shopping downtown. I was carrying coffee and walking through a crowded street when I suddenly froze. Across the road stood Daniel. But he wasn't alone. A woman was standing beside him. Not just standing, holding his hand, laughing, looking at him exactly the way a wife looks at her husband. My heart nearly stopped. For several seconds, I couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't think. I watched them enter a small restaurant together. Part of me wanted to run away. But another part demanded answers. I crossed the street and followed them. Every step felt heavier than the last. When I reached the restaurant window, I looked inside. And what I saw shattered my entire world. Daniel was sitting beside her. Not across from her, beside her, holding her hand, smiling, kissing her forehead, the same things he used to do with me. The same gestures, the same smile, the same promises. In that moment, I realized something terrifying. This wasn't an affair. This looked like something much bigger, much deeper. I left before they could see me. The tears came immediately. I sat inside my car for almost 2 hours. Crying, shaking, trying to understand what I had just witnessed. When Daniel returned home that evening, he acted completely normal. As if nothing had happened. As if he hadn't spent the day with another woman. As if he hadn't just destroyed my trust. And somehow that hurt even more. The lies came so easily to him. I decided not to confront him immediately. I needed proof. I needed answers. And most importantly, I needed to know how deep the deception went. The next few weeks became the most painful investigation of my life. I started paying attention, taking notes, watching patterns, and little by little, the truth began revealing itself. Every business trip matched dates when he visited another city. Every mysterious phone call connected to that same woman. Every excuse started falling apart. Then one night, while Daniel slept, I found something that changed everything. A receipt hidden inside his jacket pocket. At first glance, it seemed ordinary. Until I noticed 2 words printed near the bottom. Husband meal package. My hands started shaking. The receipt came from a family resort. A resort designed for married couples. And the booking listed 2 names. Daniel, and a woman named Emily. I had never heard that name before. But soon I would learn something far worse than I ever imagined. Because Emily wasn't just another woman. She wasn't a girlfriend. She wasn't a secret affair. Emily was his wife. His second wife. And Daniel had been living 2 completely separate marriages at the same time. The discovery would lead me into a web of lies so shocking that even I struggled to believe it. But what Daniel didn't know was this. The moment I learned the truth, I stopped being the victim. And started planning something he would never see coming. The night I discovered Emily's name, I barely slept. My mind was racing. I kept staring at the ceiling, wondering how someone could lie so easily for so long. For 3 years, Daniel had looked into my eyes and promised me forever. For 3 years, he had shared my home, my dreams, and my future plans. And somehow, during that same time, he had been building another life with another woman. The thought made me sick. But I wasn't going to confront him yet. Not until I knew everything. The next morning, Daniel left for work. The second his car disappeared down the street, I started searching. I went through every document I could find. Bank statements, old receipts, travel records, anything that could help me understand the truth. What I found was worse than I expected. Daniel had been renting a small apartment in another city. The payments had been hidden among business expenses. At first, I couldn't understand why. Then everything became clear. That apartment wasn't for work. It was another home, a second home for his second life. I sat there staring at the documents. My heart felt completely numb. The tears had stopped. The sadness was slowly turning into something else. Determination. Because the more I learned, the more I realized Daniel wasn't making mistakes. This wasn't a temporary bad decision. This was a carefully planned deception. Every lie had been calculated. Every excuse had been rehearsed. Every promise had been fake. And that realization changed me. I stopped asking why. Instead, I started asking how. How could I expose the truth? How could I make sure he never manipulated another person again? And then an unexpected opportunity appeared. A week later, Daniel announced another business trip. 3 days, different city, important client meeting, the usual story. The second he left, I followed him. Not directly, carefully, quietly. Hours later, I arrived in the city where he claimed his meeting was taking place. But Daniel never went near any office building. Instead, he drove straight to a quiet neighborhood. And there she was, Emily, standing outside a house, waiting for him. The moment Daniel stepped out of his car, she ran into his arms. Watching them felt like being stabbed in the heart all over again. But this time I wasn't there as a wife. I was there as someone gathering evidence. I took photos, recorded videos, documented everything, and then something unexpected happened. A little girl ran out of the house. She couldn't have been older than 6. She jumped into Daniel's arms. And Daniel picked her up immediately. The little girl called him Daddy. I felt the air leave my lungs. Daddy. The word echoed in my mind. Daniel didn't just have another wife. He had another family, an entire family, a daughter, a home, a second life, and neither woman knew the truth. I sat in my car trying to process what I had just seen. Then I made a decision. I wasn't going to fight Emily. She wasn't my enemy. She was another victim, just like me. The real problem was Daniel. And if I wanted justice, I needed Emily to know the truth. A few days later, I contacted her. At first she was suspicious. Understandably, if a stranger called you claiming your husband had another wife, would you believe them? Probably not, but then I showed her the evidence. Photos, videos, marriage records, documents, everything. I'll never forget the look on her face. The shock, the disbelief, the heartbreak. She started crying before I finished speaking. For a long time, neither of us said anything. We simply sat there in silence. 2 women connected by the same betrayal. Eventually she looked at me and asked one question. What do we do now? I had been asking myself that same question for weeks. And suddenly I knew the answer. We make sure he can't lie anymore. For the next month, Emily and I worked together. Not out of revenge, out of truth. We gathered every piece of evidence possible. Financial records, messages, photos, travel histories, everything. The deeper we looked, the worse it became. Daniel wasn't just lying emotionally. He had been hiding money, making promises to both families, creating different stories depending on who he was speaking to. His entire life was built on deception. Finally, the day arrived. Daniel's company was hosting a large anniversary celebration. Employees, friends, business partners, everyone important would be there. Daniel was excited. He spent days preparing, practicing speeches, choosing suits, planning his big night. What he didn't know was that Emily and I had plans of our own. The evening arrived. The ballroom was full. Music played softly in the background. People laughed and chatted. Daniel looked happier than ever. Confident, proud, completely unaware. Then he stepped onto the stage. The microphone was placed in his hand. He smiled at the audience and began speaking about honesty. Honesty. The irony almost made me laugh. For several minutes he talked about trust, integrity, and family values. Family values. The words felt unbelievable coming from him. Then, right in the middle of his speech, the projector behind him suddenly changed. The audience looked confused. Daniel turned around and froze. A photograph filled the giant screen. A photo of Daniel and Emily, holding hands. The room became silent. Then another photo appeared. Daniel with me. Wedding day. Another photo. Daniel with Emily. Another wedding celebration. Another photo. Then another. Then another. The truth unfolded in front of everyone. No shouting. No drama. No screaming. Just facts. Pure facts. The room watched in complete silence. Daniel's face lost all color. People began whispering. Questions spread across the crowd. Confusion turned into shock. Shock turned into understanding. And for the first time, Daniel had nowhere to hide. No excuse, no story, no escape. The truth was finally louder than his lies. He stepped away from the microphone, tried to explain, tried to control the situation. But it was too late. Everyone had seen enough. The secret life he spent years protecting collapsed in a matter of minutes. And the most powerful part, Emily and I never argued. We never fought over him. We never blamed each other. Instead, we stood together. That confused Daniel more than anything. Because manipulators often expect victims to fight each other. They don't expect them to unite. After that night, everything changed. The relationships ended, the lies ended, the double life ended. Daniel spent years creating a perfect illusion. And one evening was enough to destroy it. As for me, the recovery wasn't immediate. Healing never is. There were difficult days, lonely nights, moments when I questioned everything. But slowly, life improved. I started focusing on myself again. I traveled, made new friends, rediscovered parts of myself that had disappeared during the marriage. And most importantly, I learned a lesson I'll never forget. Sometimes revenge isn't about hurting someone. Sometimes revenge is simply revealing the truth. Because the truth has a way of doing all the work by itself. Daniel thought he could live two lives forever. He thought nobody would connect the pieces. He thought his secret was safe. But secrets built on lies rarely stay hidden forever. Eventually, every mask falls. Every story breaks apart. And every truth finds its way into the light. If you're watching this and going through betrayal right now, remember something. Being betrayed doesn't make you weak. It doesn't mean you failed. It simply means someone else chose dishonesty. And while you can't control their actions, you can control your response. Stay calm, stay patient, gather facts, trust yourself, and never underestimate the power of the truth. Because in the end, truth doesn't just expose lies. It sets you free, and that was the greatest victory I ever received.